Welcome back to the gun dungeon. Sitting here loading up some big old fat 35s. You know, I really like loading 45, all but one thing. I do not like running into mixed large primer and small primer brass. And I do pretty good at keeping them separated, but not always. There's always some small pistol primer brass that winds up in there. And let me see if I can show you the difference here. Let me go ahead and deprime this one. Yeah. So you can see one's small, one's large. And it makes it a pain in the butt, but you know, it's pretty easy to notice it when you run across it, because your primer won't go in, won't even start, won't even give her a little nudge. These are some just general target loads, 200 grain lead, flat nose, bare lead. It's just something about a big old fat 45 and a bare lead bullet. I don't know why, I just like it. Just something that makes me feel good. I like it. But since I am loading up some of these big fat slow moving 45s, it kind of brings me up on the topic that I wanted to talk about today, and it's essentially the two different theories of terminal performance, which is light and fast versus heavy and slow. And it's a topic that's been discussed, debated. Some people get really, really mad about it. Some people can discuss it normally. But a lot of people really take their beliefs to heart these days and do not like opposing opinions. But, you know, both have worked for years and years and years. They've both been around for years and years and years as far as the theories go. I mean, look at the big old fat 45-70. How long it's been around, you know, that's typically been a big, fat, heavy bullet moving fairly slow. I mean, we're going to call, for a rifle round, we'll call anything under 2,000 feet per second slow. And, you know, the big, heavy 45s are going well under 2,000 feet per second. But then, you know, you got the opposite side of the spectrum, which was the 30-30. When it came out, it was super popular because it had really good terminal performance. It had a flatter trajectory. It done really well with a lighter bullet line much faster. And you know, those theories have played out, and we've seen them both progress along the line of history here and technology and all that good stuff. And we still have both schools of thought active today. I mean, we've got new cartridges coming out in both. You got the 50 Beowulf, 450 Bushmaster, both fairly new additions. I'm going to say new as in the last 20 years to the market. And, you know, those are taking the slower, heavier approach. And you got, you know, stuff like the 224 Valkyrie. That's a little different approach. It's going to be a lighter bullet going faster. I mean, you know, the same thing with handguns. You don't see a whole lot of new, slow, and heavy cartridges in handguns. Not super new. I mean, you got the 50 Action Express that's not super old. But we did just have a fairly new addition with the 30 Super Carry being a smaller, faster bullet. The driver behind that one, of course, was capacity, but, you know, still same theory. And, you know, like I said, both are effective. Both tend to get the job done. But I'm going to be honest with you, when it comes to it, to terminal performance, I've seen, it seems to me, like when you have sufficient velocity, when the velocity is there, you tend to get more consistent performance from the bullets. You know, and that has a window as well. But if you get below it, you tend to not have expansion. And if you get too far above that velocity threshold and you start going too fast for the intended bullet, you get wild, crazy, sometimes fragmenting, sometimes, you know, jacket separation in mid-flight. So, you know, when it comes to actual terminal performance, you can have great performance from both theories, both schools of thought here, as long as the bullet technology is designed for it. And, you know, this is something that I see a lot, especially being a hand loader and using bullets and rounds that they're not typically intended for. You know, I mean, when you're looking at, let's just use 450 Bushmaster, for example, here. 450 Bushmaster uses a bullet that is the same diameter as a 45 Colt bullets. But there are bullets that are designed specifically for 450 Bushmaster, like the FTX bullets. The 300 grain XTP mag is designed kind of for more for the 460 Smith & Wesson, but you know, it works in the 450 Bushmaster because the velocities are similar between 460 and 450 Bushmaster. But now if I was to take a 200 grain 45 Colt jacketed hollow point bullet, let's just say just a standard XTP, a light for caliber 4.52 diameter XTP bullet, and slap that in a healthy charge of little gun 450 Bushmaster, it's liable to come apart in midair. Matter of fact, that was the response that I got from Hornady whenever I emailed them and asked them if I could use that bullet, because I was curious if I could or not. Of course, I didn't plan on shooting any game with it or anything, because it essentially would have been a big 45 caliber varmint bullet, pretty much. But, you know, back on point here. I know this is a reloading and rambling, and I do start rambling a lot. But back on point here, you know, if you've got a bullet that's intended to expand at a super high velocity, like let's say a 220 grain 30 caliber bullet that's intended more for something along 300 Win Mag or something like that, and then you put that bullet in a 300 blackout and lower the velocities, that bullet's not going to expand. Matter of fact, I've done it. I've shot the 220 grain, I think it was a Sierra bullet, in jail from a 300 blackout, subsonic, of course. Didn't even try to expand. But, you know, that bullet wasn't designed for that velocity. Now, I will say this. In all of the deer hunting that I've done, because that's really all I have to use as a reference for real terminal performance in live tissues, deer hunting. And I've used both theories here, the heavy, slow, and the fast, lighter bullets. And I'll say this, I've yet to see a heavy, slow bullet leave as large or catastrophic exit wound as a lighter, faster bullet. Now, is that what you want? I don't know. A lot of people want like a 4570 because it don't leave a big old exit wound, and you don't have all of that hydrostatic shock, you know, tearing up tissue and meat that you plan to eat. So you don't get a lot of that with it, and some people want that. Some people want a big old wound or big old exit wound that bleeds a lot. I'm that some people. I want a big old bloody exit wound because I'm not much of a tracker. You've heard me say this before. I need a big red highway to lead me to that deer if it don't drop in its tracks. Because where I hunt, it's thick brush, it's hillsides, it's cliffs. I mean, it's typically stuff you don't even really want to walk through most of the time, much less be trying to track a deer that's not bleeding very much for you. Now, does that mean a 4570 or a 450 Bushmaster or a 50 Beowulf round isn't going to bleed a whole lot? Not necessarily, but in my experiences, it seems like if I hit one with 50 Beowulf, and I'm going to use 50 Beowulf here because I've not been super happy with that round. I've killed 3 deer with it so far. All 3 deer double lunged behind the shoulder. I don't shoot in the shoulder because I like to eat the deer. So behind the shoulder, double lung shot. All 3 of them ran. All 3, I'm trying to think where the shortest. One on top of the hill ran about 60 yards, but it went this way then that way, so it's kind of hard to judge. 60 to 70 yards, somewhere in there. The first one I shot ran about 40 yards. Trying to think. About the same for the second one. Third one was on top of the hill. About the same for the second, about 40 yards. So not massive length, not a huge, you know, distance that I had to track them, but I did have to track them. And I didn't get much blood until I got about halfway to where the deer was. And then once I got closer to the deer, there was more and more blood. Why, I can't tell you. I didn't see any of the deer actually go down. Because like I said, thick, very thick where I hunt. But my wife shot one just here recently, year before last, I think, actually. Shot one with 6.5 Grendel, light, faster bullet, and it ran maybe 20 yards. And from the point to where it was standing when she shot it, right up to the deer, was a healthy wound trail, or a healthy blood trail. Didn't have a bit of trouble tracking. So to me, blood trail means a lot. So exit wound means a lot. Now, back to the other theory, or back to the downside of light and fast. If it's too light and too fast with a bullet not designed for that, I risk not getting an exit wound at all. So it's kind of you got to find that happy middle ground there. You know, if instead of 120 grain gold dot from that spear or from that 6.5 Grendel, instead of 120 grain gold dot, had it been, say, one of the 90 grain Varmageddons, probably would have killed the deer. Not real likely I'd have got a exit wound. So I would have had virtually no blood trail, because I don't see very many entry wounds bleeding at all. But, you know, it really comes down to the bullet selection for the velocities that you're using. And it's one of those, you can spin your wheels a long time when you start trying to find that perfect balance of weight, diameter, speed for what you want. And, you know, when you're trying to pick it, range comes into to be a factor as well. If you're out west where it's flat and you're shooting, you know, 300-400 yards consistently a game, you probably don't want slow and heavy, because you're going to be lobbing that baby in there like, you know, going to have the trajectory of a football with a 45-70. So you're light and fast all day to a point. So your heavy and slow might be 300 Win Mag. Your light and fast might be something like, you know, 6mm Creedmoor, something lighter. And, you know, you still got a top end and a low end, what you would use. And where I hunt, 100 yards that's a fairly long shot. About every deer I've ever killed has been within 100 yards. I mean, if I don't even know if I've killed a deer over 200 yards, period. Honestly, come to think of it. But, you know, rifles are a good subject to talk about this with, because you do have such extreme differences. You know what I mean? You have a big, slow, heavy bullet versus light, really, really fast bullets. When it comes to handguns, you don't really have that much of a spread. Now, granted, a 230 grain bullet going 850, 850 feet per second is going to be a big difference than, say, 115 grain bullet out of a 357 SIG going 1500 feet per second. That's a big difference, but it's not as big as a difference from 45-70 to, you know, even 223. Big differences there. I mean, when it comes to handguns, I think we really over discuss terminal performance with handguns a lot, because until you start getting to, I throw 10mm in there too, but until you start getting to 10mm, 44 Magnum, stuff like that, the terminal performance is all just so similar, even from light and heavy, or light and fast to heavy and slow. the energy overall is really, really close. But, you know, even with handguns, if you're loading a 230 grain 45 ACP and you're loading it to max charge for a defensive round, and then you load the same bullet but 185 grains to max charge according to reloading data, and then you calculate out the velocity that you're actually getting and get the energies for that, 9 times out of 10, whatever powder you're using, whatever bullet you're using, 9 times out of 10, the lighter bullet going faster will calculate out and give you more energy. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the formula to come up with the energy for bullets, for rounds, for cartridges, it puts more emphasis on the velocity as opposed to the mass. But that's how you calculate energy. So typically there'll be a difference with the lighter bullet going faster in the same cartridge and a heavy bullet going slower in the same cartridge. It's going to favor energy-wise the lighter bullet going faster. Now, does that always equal best terminal performance? Not always. A lot of times, yeah, but not always. So anyways, I feel like I've sat here and beat on y'all for, holy cow, 16 minutes now. This is going to be my longest reloading and rambling yet. But I'm going to go ahead and let y'all go. I appreciate you hanging out with me and loading some of these big 35s. That's how many I've loaded since I've been sitting here yapping with you. Not too bad. Not too bad at all. But if y'all want to help out the channel, go check out my Patreon, my sponsors down below in the description, all that good stuff. If you want to buy anything, I'm sure there's a link down there to go buy it. That helps me out. So anyways, till next time, guys, stay tuned.